Hey everybody, this is Chris McKay, and this week we have Steve Edelstein of My FBA Prep, which is an e-commerce service providing solutions. You were just telling me this right before we hit record. You said it a lot better than I'm going to say it, so I wanted you to take it away. Just introduce yourself.
Very simple. As you said, Chris, run all types of growth and strategy and partnerships for My FBA Prep, but don't let the name fool you. We are not all just Amazon, and I can go into detail later as we talk. But simply, what's really important to our business is making sure that we have good lead flow for our partners, and simple language, just revenue is achieved. Because unfortunately, in most partnership programs, it typically ends up being very one-sided. There isn't something called mutuality, which is critical to the process. And most important, we want to make sure that the relationship is certainly two-way, and most important, will again drive revenue and opportunity for our partners because they are an important part of our ecosystem.
Yeah. And so you said you do things other than Amazon. Obviously, we're going to focus mostly on Amazon stuff.
Correct.
But one issue, just to kind of deal with the elephant in the room first, and I don't know if we're going to get it out of the way or at least take it head on, but one issue that is impacting every business owner in the United States and beyond is the tariff situation. So let's just say you have current clients who are coming to you saying, how do we reconfigure this to make sure that the business does have revenue, does make a profit in the age of tariffs? And it looks like it's not just a speed bump. It looks like we're heading into an age of tariffs for at least months or years. So what would be your first answer, your initial answer to a question like that from a client?
First and foremost, take a look at your manufacturing, take a look at your cost structure, your cost of goods, understand what kind of latitude you have with the cost of goods structure. In simple language, plan for the worst, because unfortunately, that's the only way that you're going to have a very clear, very, very reasonable and mature understanding of what we're actually dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Going back to my manufacturing comment, take a look at where you're manufacturing. We have quite a few clients, no surprise, that are manufacturing in China.
Yep.
China, in our opinion, is probably the worst place to be manufacturing right now because of the excessive tariffs. With that said, we are starting to look at other areas of the world, i.e. Vietnam, Cambodia, Singapore, as possible alternatives for manufacturing. But best case scenario would be to bring the product closer to either offshore, close offshore, or onshore within the United States to be able to manufacture effectively. However, not to throw a curveball in, but we have to be very cognizant of labor costs, and therefore creative accounting needs to take place. The most simple way to explain this is take a look again at your cost of goods structure. Take a look at how you can reduce that cost of goods structure. If not permanently, but certainly temporarily, and understand how you amortize any potential customs, duties, and need I say tariff increase into your order cost, and then subsequently into your MSRP. Because let's be clear, good, bad, or indifferent, consumers now know, whether they like it or not, that they're going to be paying a higher price. Again, possibly for the short term, presumably for the long term. If that is the premise and that is the case,
right?
Please.
No, is it realistic to just move to these other countries? It's going to take you months to make the move. And when we're talking about Amazon, people don't have months to restructure their whole business. They have to do it quickly, because if it takes all that time and all you do is like raise prices in the meantime, if you lose sales over that while you're moving to another country, and then after all the effort and time and cost to move to another country, what if the tariffs skyrocket on that country too? Because if every Amazon seller goes to the same country, then they're going to show up in the crosshairs of the government and they're going to be targeted for tariffs. So does changing countries even matter at that point?
It may not, but from an exploratory standpoint, it's certainly worth going through the exercise. And also, I appreciate what you're saying. You do have to be careful when you evaluate certain countries, particularly, as I said earlier, Vietnam, Singapore, and so forth, because the tariffs do fluctuate. Right now, they're in what I like to call a safe zone. Still 10%, but still having to pay that tariff. Certainly a lot different than the 46% that they were having to absorb even less than a month ago, even less than a few
And
weeks
then,
ago. The reality is it's all evaluation. It's all understanding. And yes, timing is going to be a critical point for you to understand because you're right. You can't just shift your manufacturing quickly. It is going to take months. It could take a lot longer. But at the end of the day, you've got to protect yourself for future state, not necessarily present state.
and in terms of manufacturing in China and trying to lower your manufacturing costs in the interim, one question I've had from multiple people, which I'll ask you, is if there are so many manufacturers. I just had a conversation with a toy manufacturer,
Right,
who said there's something in the city in China where they're making toys. Most famous for making toys, there's 10,000 factories. So can't you just go to other factories and price compete with them and say, you're not able to lower my cost, I'm going to go to another factory and try and pit them against each other? Or are all Chinese factories basically going to charge you kind of the same thing for that sort of thing?
Not at all. You're absolutely correct. And price shopping is important, but also most
Price shopping.
important is making sure that the quality, and this is a big issue, especially with home goods or anything made with raw materials, for instance, ceramic product, you've got to make sure that the quality, that the firing of the product, the way it's manufactured, the finished goods, it actually resembles exactly the product that you're currently working with. Otherwise, you're going to run into quality issues. You're going to run into buyer's remorse and a lot of issues you just don't want to deal with. So yes, I do agree with you that you can quote unquote shop your product through other factories and you may get some good results. The reality is you're still having to face the tariffs no matter what. And therefore, even with the reduction, again, with that cost of goods, you still have to do creative accounting in order to understand how you amortize that cost.
You're definitely right. I mean, we're already seeing condition complaints, quality complaints coming in for some sellers who are skimping, I think.
Correct.
I don't think they've changed their manufacturing entirely. I think it's just because they're skimping on quality control and a couple of inspections along the way, or maybe they're skimping on their packaging and things are getting damaged on their way to the US.
Correct.
On the way to fulfillment centers. So I think it's like, but we already know that Amazon's upping the ante on that whole process of condition or defective item complaints.
That's right.
And
100%.
that's a longer conversation in terms of a lot of people just click accept, like we accept fault for this, not realizing it's going to take their ASIN down the next day.
100%.
So the number of appeals, which they think they're actually saving them an appeal, like, oh, good, we can click this button in Seller Central and we don't have to appeal it. They don't realize they're actually increasing the likelihood that they have to appeal it or they're hurting their account health. But putting that aside for the second, I think there's going to be more of that. And Amazon already has a process that they like. It might not be efficient, but they like the process for taking buyer complaints about quality or condition and pumping sellers through this, appeals portal. So
they do. Which is certainly an element of time we have to consider in terms of the review process, in terms of the appeal process. But I'll be the first one to raise my hand. I'm not adverse to any of this, only because I want to make sure that the product itself, in terms of quality and acceptance, and most importantly, the transactional sell-through, is clean and is deliberate and is committed. And simple language, I want to make sure that the transaction sticks with the end user. And at the end of the day, whatever steps have to be taken to make sure that the product is accepted correctly by Amazon, that it's warehoused correctly, particularly in an FBA setting, then we adhere to some. It's okay to inherit some rules. It's okay. However, we always need to stay one step ahead.
Yeah. Are you talking to a lot of people who are trying to save money by taking on more tasks and burdens themselves, even if they're not good at managing those tasks and burdens efficiently? Have people been just cutting? I mean, it's one thing to cut your ad budget, right? That's very clear.
Right.
You're risking sales rank and you're risking searchability on Amazon in advance if you do that.
Correct.
But that's straightforward. What's less straightforward is we're going to take on more of these things in-house and save money that way without considering consequences. So are you having that
No.
be a piece of these conversations or not so much?
Very, very infrequently. Very infrequently. It's really more status quo than anything else. I think
Okay.
what really is, again, if we want to look at silver lining, which I try to do, I try to be an optimistic person, particularly when I've run my own brands, is that we're learning more. We're
Mhm.
learning to be more hands-on, even if we're not hands-on. We're learning to
Right.
understand the financial accounting of a business that historically was very academic. This was your cost. This is how much you pay. This is what your delta is. This is what your gross margin is. Here's what your profitability is. Fantastic, nice and clean. However, in today's world, and I say this even sans tariffs and taxation and customs
Right.
and all those things,
Just Amazon's
just
regular.
Amazon day to day, FBA,
Yeah.
UPS,
Yeah.
you name it.
Yeah.
Be smart. Learn as much as you can. Even if you don't actually implement it yourself, know how the process works and financially, operationally, and functionally understand how the process works.
Right.
And most importantly, be smart about how you operate your business and do what you know. Do not do what you don't know.
What ideas have you thrown at people that you've encountered some resistance or reluctance to? What ideas, if any? Where does it start? Are
I
there
think a
any
lot. I think
obstacles to?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's a very interesting question. And it actually goes back to your comment about manufacturing.
Mhm.
I've had more conversations, good or bad, about companies who want to shift their manufacturing. My comment has always been pretty consistent. It's okay to evaluate, but do not make any immediate decisions on anything. Because to your point, Chris, and I give you credit on this, obviously, it is a time element. It will
Yeah.
disrupt your business flow. It'll disrupt everything across your entire what I call transactional process. And most importantly, you know, keep things in place until you absolutely have to make change. And that's it. Period. So that's the advice I
Right.
give them. Um, you know, take a step back, look at what you're doing, look at your manufacturing, look at your packaging, look at your product costs, understand what that multiple needs to look like in order for you to prove profitability. But by no means am I telling you to catastrophically change the way you do business.
Well, also, how can you start making dramatic changes in your manufacturing without impacting Prime Day?
It's not only Prime
Like,
Day.
I
It's not,
haven't seen any posts on LinkedIn about making changes A, B, and C might drastically reduce your Prime Day sales. I haven't seen a single post about that, and I'm wondering why. Yeah.
primarily because the old adage applies, and I hate to say this out loud: if it ain't broke,
Say
don't
it.
fix it.
Right.
Or as I like to also say, out of
No,
sight,
but
out of
they have
mind.
to make changes.
They do have to make
If the
changes.
tariffs are forcing you to make changes, you already know that you have to break something, whether it's working in the new world, you
Yep,
have to make changes. If it worked last year, then it wasn't broken. You didn't fix it last year, but
that's
the
correct.
change already created the break. So don't you have to make those changes? You
I
don't have
mean,
a choice.
my personal opinion is to always communicate to your audience, always communicate what those changes are and how they're going to be applied and what the impact is going to be. There are going to be others, as you've seen, who are
Right.
just not going to want to make that communication apparent because they don't want to disrupt. They don't want to rock the apple cart. They really don't. And I
Yeah,
understand that. That makes sense to me. But once that transaction gets made and the purchase is conducted and the monies are transferred, in simple language, monies are committed, you have to be upfront about what that expense is.
for sure.
No doubt. No doubt.
So beyond tariffs, I know it's hard to get away from that
No,
topic
no,
really at
this is
all,
good. It's
but
good progression.
it's, we're like I said, Prime Day is looming in the distance, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not on top of us right now. What
Correct.
other types of conversations are you having with people? Um, when the tariff conversation's over, where do you take it from there in terms of what people need to do regarding shrinking margins, competition on Amazon, or just navigating the Amazon marketplace?
It's really, it get good or bad. It's outside of Amazon. Actually, it's all of the communication. It's all the marketing. It's all the advertising. It's all the social media. Be smart
Mhm.
about it. Don't flood the market. Be very strategic about how you're utilizing these particular vehicles of marketing and communication, and make sure you are very transparent and very clear as to what that message needs to look like. And what are you communicating to your audience? I'll take a leaf out of Dr. Squatch, for instance, which, as you well know, is a meteoric brand doing
Yep.
an excessive number of products. And I know them quite well. And the bottom line is their attitude is have fun with our marketing, have fun with our creative, but yet at the same time, be responsible to our consumers and communicate to them exactly what's going on with their business. And more importantly, as they launch additional lines, as you probably have seen, i.e., grooming products, specific men's line products, make sure, again, that the communication, the messaging, the wording, all those great things are communicated correctly to the audience. And you wrap that with very good, responsible marketing. So yes, I agree with you. I agree that you have to do something, but does it have to fall within actual Amazon.com, for instance? Not necessarily.
Right.
It can live and breathe well outside of that, which then is going to drive traffic to your Amazon program and therefore presumably increase your revenue.
Well, Amazon's conscious of the tariff problems, but they're not offering solutions
Not at all.
to,
Not at all.
they're not removing fees. They're not reducing
No.
fees.
No.
I mean, it's nice that they sent this blanket message out about tariff pain, but
that doesn't do anything, because unless you're willing to give me an opportunity to understand how to work this more effectively financially and otherwise, to me, it just falls on deaf ears. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, FBA is turning into a different, interesting animal at this point, I think, for a lot of people.
Well, we can talk about this for a long time, but FBA, not to interrupt you,
Yeah.
I apologize, but FBA has been, no disrespect to Amazon, has been a bit of a financial problem child for quite a long time. And the way I look at FBA historically, again, generally speaking, FBA is a great training environment for a brand that is 1P, that's looking at a single channel of sales. Okay.
Yep.
Financially, will they get penalized? I guess that's the wrong word, but I'll use it anyway. Do they financially get penalized? Sure, they do. But they also get the opportunity for convenience. And let's be clear, FBA is a convenience for a new brand that is just figuring out how to operate their business. Again, operationally, financially, functionally, marketing, all of the above. And Amazon is a good training ground. However, again, to your point, there are no cost considerations. And most importantly, you have to be able to absorb that expense as part of your overall operating and cost of doing business. Otherwise, you are, forgive me for saying this out loud, you are fooling yourself.
Well, 1P is interesting because you're agreeing in advance to certain prices and certain rates for a certain period of time. And then if the world economy changes how much it costs you to produce an item, you're still obligated. You can't just suddenly ditch your vendor contract.
No,
right?
you can. Of course not. And that's exactly right. So
unless you go into bankruptcy,
well,
which no one wants.
Nobody wants to do that. Of course not.
Yeah.
But you make a very good point.
That's why I see vendor being high risk. 1P, I mean, first of all, I mean, we can do kind of a second conversation on that.
Right. We can do a cost
another
analysis.
time. But Amazon's kicking a lot of people out of 1P that aren't larger accounts anyway, right? So you can see what their attitude is.
But what thing? And I'll just say it out loud again. That's not actually a bad thing. I think it's actually a great thing, because what it's going to do, it's going to motivate these brands that are successful to start looking outside of that core. Need I say omni-channel environments, marketplaces, etc., and really unilaterally look at the different markets and different opportunities they have to drive revenue. And guess what? Amazon is actually helping you get there.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is not a bad thing. Not at all.
Words to live by. All right, Stephen, where can people reach you if they've got questions on anything we talked about today, or just take a look at your website and have questions for you in general?
Sure. No, thank you. First of all, you can always reach me at Stephen J. Edelstein on LinkedIn. I'm also known, interestingly enough, as the King of Beauty. Although if you looked at me now, you'd say, what?
Awesome.
So you can do that. Obviously, our website is www.myfbaprep.com. reconfiguring.com. And we certainly encourage you to visit our website, ask lots of questions, and please feel free to reach out to me with any questions whatsoever, again, on LinkedIn, and I will respond very quickly.
Awesome. Thanks for your time today. Appreciate it. Loved the conversation. Stephen of My FBA Prep. Thanks for joining us, and we will catch you next time.